What's up, everybody? We are back with another edition of the Ad Podcast. And tonight we have an exciting guest for you. Matt Garcia has recently been promoted to the president of the Sasha Group. We were able to connect over LinkedIn, and he was nice enough to come on the show and talk a little bit about what he's doing over there, his plans for the division over at VaynerMedia. Matt has a storied background in traditional agency world, holding leadership roles at shops like Fallon, Rokon, and Saatchi & Saatchi. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Absolutely, Dylan. Thanks for having me. It was a very easy yes when you reached out, my friend. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Well, Matt, why don't we, talk a little bit about your origin story? I know I hit a few notes there, but a lot of people who watch the show, young folks who are trying to transition and get into the advertising industry. I always think it's fun to kind of hear a little bit about, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Was advertising on purpose, or was it something that happened to you?
Totally.
I'd love to hear kind of how you got in the biz, and then a little bit about your career.
Totally. So it's really funny because when I interviewed with Gary V the first time, first thing he said was start at the beginning. And I was like, Gary, how beginning? And he's like, beginning. So I'll give you the very first thing I told him that I feel like, I did an okay job because I'm here now. So this is always the thing I start with. So I'm the oldest and shortest of 6 kids. I was born, and the shortest piece is good because it gives you a little chip on your shoulder, and the oldest of 6 kids is good because it sort of forces you towards account management, which is where I started my career in advertising. I would tell you I've wanted to be in advertising since probably early college, when I figured out, maybe a little earlier than college, but when I figured out business could mean not being a lawyer. I sort of knew business was banking or law. And then I figured out there's this entire different world where just looking at something a little left of center, a little right of center could totally change an outcome of a company or a political race or a movement or whatever the case may be. And as soon as I figured out I could get paid to do that, I was in. My mom, if I'm going to be really, really honest, which you definitely want to do on live streams and your first time on your podcast, my mom would tell you it was actually fated even longer. Because when I was a little kid, like baby, I was on a P&G diaper package at one point. Maybe or maybe not in a print ad. And then many years later, and this is wild, I actually ran the brand that I had been in as a baby. And I had dined out for years on this story of I was in a quick photo shoot for Pampers. And then recently my mom's like, no, it was Love's. And I was like, Mom, where were you for 15 years? I literally ran that brand. That's a better story. So anyway, it was really kind of fated in the beginning to start there. School-wise, I would do a little.
My son just booked and finished being the face of Honest Company's diapers for the toddlers.
Congrats!
Year. So
that's
maybe he'll follow in your footsteps.
I mean, I think he has to, and he's already a couple tiers up in terms of starting at Honest. That's very good. So sort of getting into the kind of deeper piece of it. I grew up in Atlanta, went to a school called Pace, went to college in Virginia at a little school called Washington and Lee. And it's really interesting because they not only didn't have an ad major, they didn't even have a marketing major. So I was dead set on this ad thing. There was an incredible marketing professor who was really building a discipline, trying to build it around the B school, or what we call the business school, or the School of Economics and Commerce. There's a couple ex-execs who had come in and were doing art and business and intro to ad classes. And I was just in. And from that kind of moment on, was hyper focused on, I want to be in advertising. I want to be in marketing. This is what I want to do. I yoked both of my degrees towards advertising and marketing. I wrote an econ thesis about alcohol advertising. My undergraduate business degree was focused on entrepreneurship and hospitality marketing. So I really, either by luck or by some sort of divine intervention, was kind of on the track for career, and then got lucky enough to really hit a bunch of them. This other one, and I didn't realize it again until probably my interview with Gary a couple of years ago before I moved over to VaynerMedia. I also had this crazy thing where I read a number of, agency advertising books, memoirs, textbooks, et cetera, that they would teach in these classes. And then throughout my career, I've actually been lucky enough to work for almost every one of those people. So I read
Wow.
Under the Radar, which was Richard Kirschenbaum's book. They taught that in my ad class. Richard was my partner at NSG SWAT. So after he left K&B, after being chairman and after the sale, he started this boutique firm that was sort of a mashup of venture capital and marketing. And I ran that for him for a few years, and I'd read his book, and it was just wild. And then I was obsessed with Fallon since I had read Juicing the Orange, just obsessed with Pat Fallon. And the irony was I never got to work at that agency until a pretty senior level as MD. And it was unfortunately after Pat was no longer with the agency. But I just had this incredible moment where these people who were like legends in this industry that I desperately wanted to be in, I read their books. I got lucky enough to then literally work for them because of sort of the life cycle of the industry. And again, back to my Gary interview, we sat down and he said this thing. He just said, Matt, you've had this kind of wild ride. You worked for Richard Kirschenbaum, you worked at Fallon, you've done this thing at Saatchi and these big pedigree agencies. And you worked at McGarry Bowen when John McGarry was running it. And he said, it's a pretty interesting career. Why me? Why now? And in the moment, it was just like, I've gotten to work for all these sort of industry legends who've done really cool things. Now I get to work for one while you're writing the next book, as opposed to after you've written the book and I get to read it. And it was just this cool moment to jump on something as it was happening. And, I think to me, it was getting to bring some of the practice and reps you got in being in places that were hyper-focused on the work, hyper-focused on some of the sort of traditional elements of advertising and account management, and then just getting to apply a little of that to sort of the next gen and to what Gary was really not even building at this point, had built for, 12, 13 years. It was really getting to jump in and see how I could do in that world. And it felt like things had not even were changing. Things had long since changed. And it was, how quickly can I get to kind of the tip of that spear, as opposed to trying to be to a place that you're adapting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I'm fascinated by this concept of reading, business books from these advertising legends and then getting a chance to work for them. I want to know, was that by intention or by accident? And I think maybe there's a little bit of both, but I had a similar experience. I read Keith Ferrazzi's book when I was a young man, Never Eat Alone. And he was the, youngest partner in the history of Deloitte, youngest chief marketing officer of a Fortune 500 when he became the CMO of Starwood in his 30s. And it was so impactful on me that I tried to meet him for years, and then finally found out we were in the same fraternity and got a warm introduction, and then got to work for him for a year. So I have a similar experience there, but wondering, were these things that you kind of sought out because these books were so impactful on your creative philosophy, or tell me a little bit more about how that all happened.
So the first one with Richard was sort of, I take that back. John McGarry hadn't written a book, but I had been fortunate enough to work at McGarry during this just rocket ship time. And I got to see sort of the ultimate client guy operating in his world. And I really, so I had been excited. I hadn't read John's book, but so in college, there was this very specific class called the ad class. And part of it was, it kind of led up to a competition where you would essentially just do a pitch. And, W&L would kind of traditionally lose to UVA every year, which we did by year 2, unfortunately. What are you going to do? But within that world, the assigned textbooks from this marketing professor, Amanda Bauer, who really did just cement my love and my deep desire to be in this. She didn't assign textbooks. She assigned just this long list of agency books, and you got to pick depending on sort of your role. And then if you were in this sort of executive role, you had to pick one from everything. So I picked the stuff that looked most interesting, just devoured them over a winter break or something like that, because I really did enjoy reading about advertising. And then as I started to get into the industry, and this is why I start with the story about John, I realized these legendary people who had literally written the book on how to do XYZ were still there. And so I started to kind of find out how I could seek some of these folks out, how I could be a little better at what I now know was networking. But the Richard one was a little bit accident. I had a headhunter reach out really well, and we'd been connected, and there was sort of a mutual thing. And she said, I kind of have this wild one Richard Kirschenbaum's launched this new agency. It's this mashup of, as I mentioned, venture capital and marketing. He's got some younger partners, and he's looking for kind of an account guy, new business guy. He's kind of looking for you. Would you ever? And I was like, yes. She's like, I didn't finish. I was like, well, I want to meet Richard Kirschenbaum. I'll do it just for that. And I sat down with him, and I'll never forget. We met at a hotel bar in Soho. And he's like, so, tell me about yourself, blah, blah, blah. I was like, look, I'm here because I read your book and I really wanted to meet you. And so that was the first time when I really was like, I have to meet this guy. I have to meet him and sort of just see what he's like in person. And what I realized is, one, it's bizarre to meet someone after you've read their book. It's a little bit like, and this is the modern version of it, but it's a little bit like if you've gone too deep on somebody's socials and then you start chatting and you're like, am I letting on too much, with this? But you figure it's okay. You wouldn't have written the book if you didn't want people telling you some of the story back. So that was really the first time with Richard. As some of the other pieces started to come into play, like the Fallon piece was this really interesting, just sort of confluence of circumstances. And this one's probably a little off topic on the book, but I joined Fallon in July 2020, which for anybody who doesn't remember that time was a bizarre time to join a place as managing director. And oh my God, it was bizarre. But the thing that made it even crazier is over the course of like kind of early May through July when I joined, I met all the Fallon people, really decided like, this is amazing. I want to do it. Then my wife and I went off, had my first kid in New York City, like absolute teeth of the pandemic, came back, started the Fallon. So it was all just kind of wild life change at once. But, obviously, unfortunately, at that time, Pat had passed, but I had the opportunity to meet Fred Sen. And I remember introducing myself to him. I was like, Fred, I'm Matt. I run the New York. He's like, I know you run the New York office. You're the managing director of the agency. So it was yet again one of these situations where it's like, I do. Take a deep breath. We know you literally read the book. Like, don't try not to nerd out too hard on this stuff. So it was, maybe it's the opposite of like the don't meet your heroes. It was, if you're into what you're reading, meet them, reach out. And maybe it gets lucky and they hire you to do something of consequence there. It worked out for me, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's a boldness that, like people who are, born account people or biz dev people just have that senseless, kind of fearless ability to say like, hey, what's the worst that could happen? Somebody's going to say no. Right. And I've had the same experience with Keith. I've got to meet Gary a few times over the years, once early in my career at South by Southwest. This year, the ad podcast was actually official media for VCon. So that was a big moment for me.
What did you think of VCon this year?
Oh man, I was blown away. I mean, I had never been before. I found out about it last minute and applied as a media personality or whatever to come and cover the show. And so inspirational, and just the level of speakers were amazing. The fact that it was in Los Angeles was really cool. And it really kind of opened up my eyes to this like whole other component of Gary's brand of like, kind of this mashup of like the collectibles world and, people who follow him from an entrepreneur's perspective and like different brands and personal development speakers who were there. It was just like, it was wild. It was, all the things that you would expect and then more.
So I mean, it's so cool, and it's two people who got paid to be there too, which is that. I mean, that's maybe the ultimate addition. I was like, yeah, this is part of my job. It's right, just incredible. But I think that's kind of the perfect example of this sort of broader universe that comes with VaynerX and comes with that world. There's very few people in our industry where there is also just these like ripple effects out to so many communities, right? Whether it is entrepreneurial, whether it is collector, whether, in the moment it was Web3 or all of these different pieces, there's really interesting worlds that his reach and extension is just, I mean, I wish I had a more eloquent word than wild, but it's wild. I think seeing something like VCon, I mean, knowing that was manifested by somebody and then became this thing where thousands of people showed up to downtown LA. I mean, there were like ticket lines and it was wild. And I can remember at one point walking in, trying to explain to somebody who was just passing by the sort of broader venue area, and you're like, how long? Do you have like 15 minutes? Because like I'm gonna need like
Right.
where are you on social media? And then what's your understanding of a couple of these things? And like, what do you know about sort of collector culture and how it's connected? And I was just like, never mind, you should come. I can get you a pad. You just sort of jump into like, you should pop in and see what this thing's about. It's easier than explaining it, but it's wild that you were there.
Yeah, no, it was a great time. Definitely enjoyed covering it and had a bunch of good interviews and a bunch of great follow-up interviews from meeting speakers and people. So definitely
awesome.
I'll be back for whatever the next iteration looks like. So yeah, let's get into your Gary story. So, I want to start by prefacing that, Gary, I think in the early days of Vayner, he was polarizing within the traditional advertising community. People either loved him or, quite frankly, there were some people that hated him, didn't think he had a place in like the agency world. And obviously he's proven those people wrong in spades. But as a guy who had such a traditional background, like what was your initial, like, were you a fan and did you get it from day one? Were you a fan of his books, or was it kind of something that you kind of came around to after getting to know him and getting recruited by the agency?
It was kind of a few different things. So one, not unlike some of the stories with Richard, not unlike some of the obsession with Fallon. The early times were when there came to be this opportunity to meet. I was like, look, I was very into VaynerX, into the agency. I was really excited about the role. But the final meeting, I was like, even if there's no chance this guy wants to ever hire me, you're taking the meeting. It's super cool. Like it was one of those moments in my career, it's like a Super Bowl spot or getting invited to do creds for Apple. It's one of those moments in your career. It's like, I'm going to remember this, just like I remember that, interview in the hotel bar with Richard. I was just so excited to do it. I think that if I'm going to be incredibly honest, the thing that got me most excited about Gary, even more so, the earliest days, even more so than a lot of the marketing textbooks, was actually a lot more of his philosophies on management and people, period. So much of it spoke to me so deeply because I'm a huge believer in some of this stuff. You hear it and you're like, oh my God, really? No kidding. But I'm a huge believer in this idea of people who feel safe and who feel supported and who feel like they're in an environment that gets them and wants them to succeed. Shocker. Turns out they do great work. I'm a big believer in treating people kindly, that kindness is ultimately this incredible tool. It's not a sign of weakness or you're not a tough negotiator. It's a sign of someone who's secure in their place and wanting to leave things in a better place than they found them. And in fact, like, that was a lot of what I'd heard about him, even more than I'd gone sort of deep into the world, because at the time I was, as you had said, a bit more traditional. And for me, it was, if this is really true, right? If kindness at the center, building the greatest human powered organization in existence, truly not worried about 2023s or thinking about 2028, if even like 30% of that is true, you got to go work for Gary for at least a minute and see. And that was sort of the spirit when I began the conversation. And then when I met him, and then when we had an extended interview, and then when I started to get to work for him, I was like, oh my God, it's really true. And he deeply believes this stuff. And he deeply means it when he tells every person in the company to text him, or when he tells people to come in and get time and spend time and do the things. And I realized it was real. And I also realized that some of the Vayner core beliefs were just so central and so shared in a way that I just didn't realize and had maybe just never articulated as well. But things like how you make people feel, they're going to remember forever. And it just seemed like that genuinely was at the center of the organization, one. And then two, if everybody's kind of doing the same thing, it feels like a really good time to maybe follow someone who's doing something slightly different. And I think, I was really fortunate in that I got to join VaynerMedia and VaynerX when it was already very clear that there was some very serious there. So I didn't even have to take some of the leap of faith that some of the folks who came before me did. So I wish I could have been like, oh, I immediately knew when I saw it. I immediately, as I went deep on Gary, was like, this is someone I believe in. He means what he says. He is serious about let's not talk about the sort of nonsense that does well in a room. Let's talk about the things that build a business. And that's intriguing, but how he treats people and this belief that kindness and compassion and empathy and, the traditional like EQ greater than IQ, all of that stuff, and maybe that's the account guy, maybe it's just the talker, but all of that stuff spoke to me so much. And then when I spent a second with him in person and then extended time with him in person and then really got into interview, I was like, oh my God, it's real. Let's try this, right? If this is real, they're already doing something different. We're doing something different. It feels like it's already working. There feels like there's some truth there. Let's do it. So it was really sort of that. It was, again, it was the chance to, if I had been, maybe 20 years older, it was the chance to jump in, with Richard Kirschenbaum. If we take that sort of extended thing, it was the chance to jump in as he was building that, but also already had this track record. It was almost impossible to kind of replicate. There's already this record of like success, this thing's working, but also what it can be is so much bigger. It was just a kind of an incredibly fortunate and lucky time to get asked to join and have an opportunity to join. We were established, we were growing, we were doing the things, tons of Fortune 50 brands, but also the ambition for where the company and where the holding company wanted to go is so far beyond where we are currently that it just felt like, I don't know, it felt like joining at a really unique time. And so far, 2 years in, it's lived up and it's exceeded in a lot of ways.
I love that. So let's get into the Sasha Group. I have a vague understanding of what that division of VaynerX does from the outside looking in. We talked a little bit about it before we hit the record button on the camera. Really focused on SMB as defined by $1 million to $100 million a year in earnings. Focused on the entrepreneur. I can't think of any other agency out there that has a division that's really focused on this category or this segment. So why was it important to Gary and the VaynerX team to have this offering? How did it come about? And what types of work are you guys doing today?
Sure. So there's a bunch there. So I'll kind of work my way back.
Sure.
So I think the first one, starting with the name and starting with inception and the sort of belief of where we were founded. So first of all, Sasha is Gary's dad, Sasha Vaynerchuk. Mm-hmm. And I also love to point out a lot of our leadership team, and this is not always typical in agencies. A lot of us are dads. So it's really cool, or parents in general, but it's really cool to me to run a company named after somebody's dad and be a dad and try and bring some of that dad spirit to what we do every day. And I know that was not the place to start, but I kind of had to hit that one because I didn't know where else I was going to sneak it in. But so why SMB at the roots? I mean, I think it's the roots of almost everything that Gary's done, right? It started with his dad's wine store. It started with a single wine store that you turned into an online platform, that you turned into a business that, think about the way that spawned and what has become Wine Library and what that has been from inception. So it really did, if you think about where we started, it's an interesting place and a very natural extension, one. Two, as Gary's profile really grew and you saw these incredibly interesting growing companies, they sought him out because very often he was inspiration from them from the beginning. So how could we build something that could fully support them as well? And then something that's really interesting is a man named James Orsini, who I've been fortunate enough to work with when he was CFO at Saatchi and a lot of sort of a lot of different roles in the industry. He actually launched Sasha Group for Gary many years ago when it first launched. And I've since, I had worked with him at Saatchi. So it was very cool to also kind of pick up something that someone who had been a mentor at different phases had started. So that was kind of the jumping off point on the SMB. I think what starts to become interesting as you evolve is, one, thinking about even where we started. I was talking about being on Love's Box. You were talking about your son being on Honest Co's diapers. Honest Co didn't exist when we were kids. And now it is an absolute juggernaut in the industry. And it's a juggernaut in sort of baby period. So a lot of brands that didn't exist, maybe not even when I was a kid, how about when I started my career? Wouldn't you want to be on the side of the agency that catches that, builds that, is a part of what that could be, right? It's to a certain degree, it's almost like placing bets. There are
It's
opportunities
almost
there.
like
Some of these,
it's like the venture capital model or the accelerator model, right? Like you're getting in at the ground floor. That way, by the time it, scales to 100 million, they're not looking for another agency because you guys have been there since the beginning.
exactly. And I had been fortunate enough to do pieces of that when I was the managing director of NSG SWAT for Richard Kirschenbaum. And this was just happening in a different scale. So that was sort of the first piece. I think what's been really interesting is as we've evolved as an agency, we've tried to keep that SMB at our roots, but we have also found that, frankly, just based on client attraction to the model, client attraction to VaynerX in general, our business is really starting to move to what I kind of consider a bit of a spectrum. So on one end, we do have traditional retained big clients, probably closer to that 100 million plus. So we're really stretching the M of the B in SMB here, but on the higher end, and everyone loves those. And those are clients that would work at any agency. And in some ways, it's almost an elephant, a huge situation where there's a true conflict shop ability to have that. On the other end of the spectrum, what we've actually done to really hold true to our SMB roots, and we just launched this, is we've launched what is essentially a consulting product that we call Sprints. Because one, consulting feels like you're going to give me a deck, you're going to show up and tell me a bunch of things that I'm going to have to figure out how to implement on my own. So for us, we really wanted to bring a bit more of that sort of startup mindset, agile development mindset. So Sasha Sprints, and there, that really is our core package for SMB. We literally, for folks below a certain size, we have a literal menu of offerings of here's what we can do. This is what it starts at. This is what a timeline looks at. And, if this thing's really going to hit and really working, you'll have a lot of clients on this consulting side who are growing in an interesting stage of growth, depending on, how successful we are, how successful they are in building what they're doing. There could be a moment where they are then ready to, kind of jump to the other side of the spectrum and truly have us operate as an AOR with social at the center. Or they may not be there yet. But there could be an incredible moment to introduce them to our sister agency, VaynerCommerce, who can build a truly world-class D2C experience for D2C web experience for them, or introduce them to even Sadam, who's our production partner, who can do creator-led productions directly with them. So ultimately, the way we've really tried to service SMB, but service in a way that can scale and be efficient for them, but also be a good thing for us, is trying to really kind of solidify this consulting product and sort of series of offerings. So that's really how we've stuck to it.
I love that.
I think in general, and I've actually started doing this a lot, my one-on-ones with folks at Sasha. I really do believe that the brands that certainly will be of consequence and interesting to my kids, I probably haven't heard of just yet. I'm hoping they're going to be in my Salesforce by the time you and I finish this up and they want to start talking to Sasha, or at the very least talking to Sasha Sprints. But I believe that. I really do think brands and companies of consequence are being invented now. And I want to be on the side that helps them grow in a really interesting way. And then, again, virtuous cycle. They stay with us as they become the next Fortune 500, or as they become the next Poppy, right? That's something we talk a lot about in the VaynerX universe, is looking at somebody like a Poppy. We really will get into this world of, when we're speaking to more of a legacy brand, we'll get into this world of you should play the game a bit differently. And we point at like a Poppy versus a, more of a traditional soda or someone else in the beverage space. And the thing that's been such a wild kind of punctuation on that is, one, if we did something in late January versus early February, I then got to add a little note that, now they've reached the scale where they're doing a Super Bowl ad, and then you wait a few more weeks, and it's like, now they have been acquired by PepsiCo for $1.5 billion. So it starts to kind of prove the model on its own as well. So those are really gratifying ones, and I'm often like, no, I'll show you a PDF. We've been talking about them for years. I promise this isn't just a cute anecdote we picked up now. So that is like the perfect example of that's the ultimate home run. That's the ultimate hit you'd like to get. So that's really the piece that has been so exciting and so attractive. And from kind of my perspective, the thing that's really interesting is, VaynerX is it's independent. We're the large, we talk about ourselves as one of the largest independent media companies in the world. But despite being independent, we're pretty big. We're thousands of people globally. And for someone who's come from traditional agencies, I've also come from traditional agencies of a kind of specific size. And if I'm doing my job well, I don't think Sasha will stay at this side, hopefully. But that couple hundred people, and I kind of talk about it a little bit like a couple hundred pirates, or like this couple hundred kind of people on our island getting to do our own thing. I got to have that within Vayner and have all of the incredible things that come from the VaynerX world, but also still have this amazing group of a couple hundred people who are kind of pirates and want to do things differently and try things differently and operate with that startup mentality. So sorry, I know I'm kind of all over the place a little bit on this one, but that really
it's great.
is
I love it.
World within a world, right? The entrepreneurial world within the ultimate entrepreneurial world is really how I've been looking at it, and having us, try to operate at the speed of a startup and, be able to pivot quickly. The example I always give, I really do. VaynerMedia is, the most contemporary big agency. I fundamentally believe that, not just because it's a part of my job and a part of my company. I really do believe that. But you can pivot 150 people faster than you can pivot 1,500. So I love this notion of the Sasha Group being able to be like the most distilled version of whatever we have cooking in the moment. If we have a wild idea on something we want to try, we can try it much faster with a smaller crew that can pivot quickly and knows how to do that. So that was sort of another piece that was just on a personal level super attractive, and something that's been so fun to just get to live these past few months, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I love that. And I noticed that another focus was, like you mentioned, on, the entrepreneur and challenger brands. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the show, but I feel like Gary really invented this idea of founder-led marketing. Now it's like a rage, and, everybody from, Mark Zuckerberg to, you name your like direct consumer entrepreneur, they're all kind of like living this like lifestyle as an entrepreneur and kind of documenting their story of growth and the troubles and like the highs and the lows, and really just the storytelling opportunity that entrepreneurs have. And, how I heard Gary, when he was promoting his last book on Megyn Kelly, talking about how we are living in a time where the democratization of media and the ability for anybody to jump on TikTok or start creating vertical videos and go viral. There's like never been a moment like this in history because of like the TikTok effect. So
Exactly.
How much do you guys take kind of Gary's personal brand and thought leadership that he's, creating through his own videos and podcasts and books and stuff like that? And how much of that do you distill into strategies that entrepreneurs can use to grow their own business models?
I mean, it's literally central to what we do. What we really look for our, for all of our clients, is we look to help them harness underpriced attention. And underpriced attention. And then the other thing we do, and it's fun, I always think about our creds deck. We have this picture where we talk about being obsessed with PAC, which is platforms, algorithms, and culture. And even in the 2 years ago when I started here, it was just platforms and culture, but we've actually broken algorithms out as a part of it. And the reason I say that is we go incredibly deep into the comments. We go incredibly deep into the platforms, because that is how Gary has always operated on his personal brand and his personal content. And when we see something that is working particularly well, or a feature that the platforms are prioritizing, we try to use it. Because when, for example, Instagram wants to see if a new feature is going to hit, they'll reward people who are using that feature. So what we'll do is things that we see perform for Gary and for brand Gary V, we try to bring that to the forefront for our clients, and we do it on like a near daily basis. And I mean this, like I will get a text from Gary, or my whole leadership team will get a text from Gary saying, look, my team said Facebook's popping off right now, and for some reason, text only posts are crushing. Really push your teams to get your clients to do a ton of that. Let's try and take advantage while it's working. Let's see what's going on. So that idea of sort of what is working in the algos, on the platforms, in culture, and really leveraging that, or sort of wrapping the message we want to or need to tell on our clients' behalf in that. That's what Gary does, and it's central to how we operate. And I think it's one of the things that makes us really, really unique. And Yeah, I couldn't, that spirit really couldn't be more central to how we operate. And I think it's one of the things that makes us particularly unique. I also think if we go a bit broader to kind of what the entrepreneurial spirit means, it also means the best way to start doing things is to do them. Right? Don't spend forever in this planning phase. You want to start making content, make content, and then see how it performs, and then improve on it, and then make more and do it again and improve on it, and study what hits, and then do more of what works and do less of what doesn't. And the thing that's so interesting, and again, whether it's brand Gary V, whether it's something we're making for our clients, whether it's sort of social in general, you talked about it, the TikTok effect. We call it the TikTokification of social media. And the thing that's really interesting is social media is almost a misnomer now because it's really interest media, right? So we are in a phase where 95%, and you can test this, whether it's with your own content for the podcast, what you will see is 95% of the people who see your content is driven algorithmically. It's not driven by your followers. So for the first time in history, you can get a single video or a single post or whatever piece of social content it may be in front of millions of people, not just for free, but you have some of the smartest companies in the world with some of the most sophisticated algorithms putting that content in front of people who they think will like it. So we're in a moment where if you think about the industry and media and all these pieces traditionally, you kind of had this ability with media to make sure everybody, or make sure to a certain degree, everybody in your target was going to see something. Now you can do that for free if the something you're making is just relevant enough. And I think that is such a massive piece of what Gary drives at and talks about in so much of what he does. And we try to bring that to the forefront for our clients every day, which is relevance is now reach. If you can find a way, that sort of Venn diagram of relevance, to say what you want to or need to say and just wrap it in something that your potential customer, potential consumer cares about in the moment, it's going to get reach. And then when something gets some reach, then start spending behind it and exploit it, right? Rather than using media to force a message or maybe make up for so creative, media now, and again, straight from Gary's playbook, media now should be used to amplify organic creative that's working well. And we know it's working because we see people looking at it. So that, that was a very long-winded answer to a pretty straightforward question.
I love it. You almost don't, you don't need creative testing as much because of the speed of velocity of which, the algorithm, requires. Like you've got to put out stuff on almost a daily basis, and then you're getting real-time feedback on what's working. And those are the assets that should essentially become your paid social campaigns. I love that. It's a simple insight, but it's something we need to remember. You also said something that kind of stuck with me earlier in the interview, this idea of like, you never know how important a single interaction is with somebody or leaving somebody with a memorable impression. I remember 13 years ago when I was starting in my career, I was at this company called Channel Factory, and we had a gym down in the basement of our office, and I was addicted to that app Foursquare, and I would check in everywhere that I went. And I remember I checked in at the gym one day, and then all of a sudden I get a tweet from General Electric, and it's like, "Hey, Dylan, we're very, very impressed with your commitment to physical fitness. Like, please DM us your address." And I'm like, "What is this?" But I'll go along with it. So I DM my address, and a couple of days later, I had a basketball. Like General Electric sent me a basketball, and they're like, "Hey, here's a basketball. It was probably branded or something like that. Like, hope you continue to like carry on with your wellness journey," or something like that. And I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!" Like, got my coworkers together, and we went and played like 4-on-4 basketball in the gym, and then we taped it and tweeted it back to GE. But that's a campaign, like a impactful, like where the online bridge the offline. I still think about it today, and in this example that I always bring up of like the most memorable social interaction I ever had with a brand. Well, there was also the time that I tweeted a hot sauce bottle at South by Southwest and got invited to a dinner with Anthony Bourdain, but that was just like cool factor. But
I feel like we need to hear that
Yeah.
story too. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'll maybe loop around to that. But you talk about like sometimes it's not just about reach, right? It's about memorable touch points that stick with people forever, and they always will remember, that interaction and that brand, and it creates brand love and brand loyalty because they felt like they had an unforgettable human experience with the brand. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you guys think about those not only like on trend approaches, but like those approaches that create memorable, lasting touch points with brands?
Yes. And there's one I really want to talk about, and I know I can't because there's going to be like the second it hits, I will send you a bag.
Nice.
I can say nothing more.
I'm
But the
excited.
second it hits, and I will be
go.
able to tell you the whole story. It's really cool, but it's like an insight is going to impact a product for a pretty serious. Like it's cool, and I'm going to get in trouble. Say no more. So what you said is amazing because I think it can again sort of take place on a spectrum. And I'll give you a small anecdote, and then we can sort of expand out to what we try to do. So we have this thing that we call CAS-C, which is comments is creative. And it's a little bit like, back in the day, we would call it like surprise and delight is sort of an extension of that same thought, which is what I think GE did an exceptional job of doing with you. And you're telling the story 13 years later. And I still think it's, like you think it's cool. I think it's cool. Like it's an incredible moment of connection. So part of that is just every once in a while, back to your entrepreneurial story or your entrepreneurial question earlier, part of it is just act like a human talking to another human. But back to the CAS-C thing. So what we have started to do a bit more of is, yes, we're all about content quality, but also at quantity. But CAS-C is essentially getting deep into the platforms and finding some other places where your brand could potentially be relevant and just showing up in the comments. So for example, we have, Tide to the Tide Pens, they're a client. And we had a comment on a creator's piece of content where they're playing with invisible ink. And we dropped a comment on there, and the comment got 375,000 likes.
Wow.
The comment got 375,000 likes. So to get that many engagements, how many impressions, how many people saw that and then took the time to like it is wild. So the reason I start with something like that is one of those moments where, like, if Nike or GE or Tide or any collection of brands, big or small, depending on who you are, if they comment on your personal social, it's pretty freaking cool. You know what I mean? It's this moment of, I kind of made it. It's this cool little stamp of approval. Kind of like someone asking you to come on their podcast. I'm just going to be honest there.
Sure. Yeah, let's go.
But seriously, right? It's this cool stamp. And then from there, it is, how do you scale that experience, right? Do we make it, is it to the point where you're doing really interesting one-to-one gifting? So like on the VaynerMedia side of the house, we had a great social seating product we were doing for a big client. I can't get too into some of the specifics, but we essentially activated a couple hundred people from a friends and family network, or maybe a degree removed. And think about the sort of VaynerX friends and family network. It's pretty interesting people, pretty cool creators.
Pretty legit.
And what we started to do for this gifting program on behalf of the brand was, one, we would just reach out via DM, one of our core relationship folks, say, hey, we've got a client. We'd love to give you something. They love what you're doing. We don't need you to post, but totally up to you. And I swear to you, there's no contract. There's nothing obligation. We would send them something. Sometimes it was custom. Sometimes we'd find out that their dad was really into the brand's leather goods. So instead of sending them something, we'd send something for their dad because Father's Day was close. But it was that sort of thought of a little bit of personal from a big brand. And people, even if they are a creator or influencer, done without someone saying, like, here's a contract, here's your payment, here's what you need me to do, done sort of a gift. And we like what you're doing. Hope you enjoy this. One, we didn't get a single person who was like, no, don't gift me. And then two, 85 to 90% of the people posted content without being asked. And then some of them even granted the client permission to use it and paid. So that's the way we start to create it, right? So on the lowest end, it's comments, but thoughtful comments in places where it makes sense. On the highest end, it is it's a custom gifting program, but being able to kind of scale those pieces, do that in an interesting way is massive, massive. And
Yeah,
then of
I love that.
course, the Vayner way, the Sasha way on all of this is make sure you're capturing all of this as it's happening, because it should all be content. And I think that's where you really start to have these interesting pieces of a brand's doing something personal and then a brand's using their profile to raise yours, or you're mutually raising together, but it doesn't feel transactional. It feels, I'm going to sound ridiculous, but it's like game recognizing game a little bit. You know what I mean? It's when you can get that moment, it feels authentic. It gives you that feeling of like, ooh, like everyone likes to feel a little recognized. If you can do that, as opposed to having it feel like a targeted gifting campaign or a targeted like, hey, let's surprise and delight, I think it means a lot more. Who used to do, and I think they do this still, but like Taylor Swift used to do the best version of this.
Oh yeah,
right?
Taylor
Showing
Swift.
up to people's.
She's like the she is the prototypical celebrity that actually learned how to behave like an influencer or a creator, and she is probably the most successful celebrity because of that.
Exactly, and it is again, it is just this moment of like, it'd be cool if she sent you a wedding gift. It's a whole lot cooler that she showed up for 15 minutes. And I think, so I really do think there's something to that. Anyway, sorry. But again, it comes from that spirit of G sending you that basketball. It's like, here's something you're doing. We recognize it. We make you feel special, and we just low key support it. I bet they didn't ask you to film it.
Nope.
They didn't ask you to tweet the ball back at them. They didn't ask you to get your coworkers together. They certainly didn't ask for the free publicity 13 years later.
Yeah, totally.
I think about how much more impactful that is.
Yeah, you're so right. I think it's the generosity factor of like just leading with a random act of kindness with no expectations, right? I think that's the best way to approach creator marketing. So many brands will come to me and say, hey, we want to do a gifting campaign, but we only want to send to people who sign up for our affiliate program, or we want to make sure that if they receive this product, it's worth XYZ. Like as a talent agent and a talent manager, anything that's like comes with strings attached, I always used to just hit the delete button in my inbox. But if a brand sent something really cool to one of my clients, and like you said, it was customized, it had some level of personalization or human touch, whether that was handwritten note, blah, blah, blah. Like, of course, I'm going to give that to her. I'm not going to, expect her to, do a post or anything like that. But at least that's going to get past me as the gatekeeper's, desk and into the hands of the creator if you don't have that personal relationship. So,
totally.
I think that I think you're hopefully resonating with a lot of, I think in general, influencer marketing practitioners know this, but sometimes the people that run those spends or run those departments, they think too much about ROI on the front end, and they trip over dollars to get to nickels.
First of all, I love that expression. Second of all, it's so spot on. And even something you said at the very beginning when you started there, like just so resonated. If you give me this list of stuff you need me or my client to do on behalf of you, if I accept this gift, it's not a gift.
Mm-mm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's right. It's not. I'm going to give you a bag instead of cutting you a check if you do X, Y, Z. And chances are I will do the letter of the law on XYZ if I wanted the bag badly enough or wanted to say we had a partnership with that brand. But to your point, it's like, if it seems like you've taken an interest in me, there's a natural fit, there's a reason we're doing this, there's a mutual support. And by the way, in my opinion, the gold star would also have been a personalized letter to you too, because the people who are really doing this well know the talent managers, know the people who look after the people. And I think that's where you can really, really start to have something compelling and really start to have something interesting. It's a little bit more like act like a person, right? A gift given without expectation is a gift. And very often people like to pay that back, and people like to spend time with people that do things like that. And whether it's a brand or whether it's a person, or again, back to your idea of they're starting to become very much one and the same, especially when it's an entrepreneurial or a founder-led brand, behave like a person.
Yeah, I love that. I want to circle back to, in prep for this interview, I just did a quick Gary V news search and wanted to see if there was anything new hitting the wires, which there always is. But something that I thought was interesting that he kind of reinstilled. There's so many creators out there that say they are suffering from creative fatigue and burnout and creator mental health. And I don't want to diminish anybody that's like having real issues, but Gary just kind of re-emphasized his story of like he grinded for 8 years with no team, like doing it on his own by himself. And the minute he had resources, he reinvested in himself. He reinvested in people to help him scale.
Yep.
People that could come to the table with creative input and different skill sets to like help him elevate his brand. But the other thing that he talked about is investing in yourself from the perspective of like so many, I think, creators think that just because like you shouldn't buy media as a creator, everything should be this like organic slog to like eventually like then kind of climbing into meaningful numbers. But just because you're investing in good sources of paid doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Don't go buy bot farms from India, but like leverage the platforms and use the paid media capabilities of these platforms to promote your content to help you grow. Do you want to dispel any myths that creator culture has that you absolutely can't buy media in order to help yourself grow faster at a hockey stick?
Yes, I have one, and honestly, I actually believe it's an adage that applies to marketing, full stop. The fastest way to kill a bad product is good marketing. I'm serious, right? So often what we're tasked with doing is awareness or trial. And if we lead the proverbial horse to water and then the water is foul, we did our job. It wasn't potable. What do you want me to do? So in the world where so move away from ridiculous metaphors, get to the world of a creator. If you're making something of substance and something interesting and something that's going to hit with the crowd, right? Breakthrough requires quality and quantity. And if you have found something that is starting to resonate, investing in yourself, investing in your craft means let's get this in front of some more people to make sure there's some real there. And putting a little bit of money behind something, can let you, perhaps act on a hypothesis that this specific audience defined demographically or interest-wise might really benefit from this, right? So to me, the idea of putting some media behind your content, it's actually a really bold move because that's going to have more people see it. And if more people see it and are turned off to it, you might have lost your opportunity. So I really actually do almost view it in the opposite direction. Find what's important, find what you think resonates. And if the message is important enough that you're going to record it and make it and take the time to do it, and there's an opportunity, or you find yourself with the resources to have a few more folks perhaps see it. And then again, if they like it, we have paid algorithms follow the organic algorithms, they'll continue to be delivered your content. But sometimes we need to give it that little spur. So I fundamentally believe not only is it an okay tool, it's a tool you should be using, but use it judiciously. Because again, fastest way to kill a bad product is good marketing.
I love that. So you guys were early to live shopping and kind of this idea of social commerce. I think you guys were probably early adopters there, especially as it was exploding in China and started to show signs of becoming successful in the US. I think the latest numbers are TikTok Shop is up to an $80 billion a year sales channel. You guys have a platform called Whatnot as well. Will you maybe just give a little bit of a take on live shopping and social commerce and how you guys are thinking about it at the agency?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's so one, there's very often this idea of what's old is new again. Social shopping has been around for a very long time. We just used to call it QVC and HSN.
Yeah.
But I'm serious. And by the way, if you Google either of those, they're now going to take to some of the more, now traditional, but I guess new social shopping platforms and live commerce platforms. They're going to lean into that. So I think to me in particular, for a lot of our clients who are starting to play in a live shopping place, we're gonna do we'll try. So one, it begins with try, right? Start by starting. This is a thing that is incredibly powerful because it can really do two things at once. One, thinking about going live and an opportunity for engagement and connection, period. This is something that can be a legitimate awareness driving engagement vehicle that also has immediate sales. And there are very few things that exist, period, where you're able to do that. And I think what you're able to do, and if you're, as you mentioned, looking at some of what was coming from China, bigger sort of live shopping personalities, people would watch this all day. And it was deeply engaging and something that people sought out as entertainment. And again, there's always this incredible looming piece of there's also literal opportunity to convert in real time. So to us, to someone who's entrepreneurial, and again, back to this idea of, you kill a bad product with good marketing, this is an opportunity to go direct with your customers and potential customers, share exactly what you want about your product or your brand unfiltered, engage with them live, and then get instantaneous feedback as to whether or not that's hitting. I mean, how is that not a platform? How is that not an area that you're going to encourage your clients to invest in, especially when you can dabble a toe for, a fairly minor, fairly moderate investment, regardless of the stage of business. And not to mention, back to this founder-led brand, you can be the face of this thing if you do it right. My current obsession is live shopping for 501c3s. Like I desperately want to have the next generation of the Jerry Lewis telethon on TikTok. Like I think there can be this incredible ability to use live shopping or that, the concept to also raise money in a really interesting way too. So that to me is what's going to get exciting. Is there's just not a lot of places, typically you talk brand overnight or, sales overnight, brand over time. And I think this is an opportunity to do that, simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's smart. The gaming streamers were kind of early to those like 24-hour live streams for charity. We did one for Stand Up to Cancer at my last agency. It was a great campaign. It raised I think a couple $100,000 for them. So, I think that idea of applying that to these social shopping models or these social shopping live streams could be really interesting as well, because then you feel like you're, now you're even nudged. Like I get pretty darn close to converting to a lot of these TikTok shop items fairly often. But if you told me I could also benefit a charity or a cause that I cared about, just make it that much more easy for the consumer.
Exactly. And it's, again, it's a lot of think about what else you can do with product demos and other things that are very much back to the, what is old is new again. It's taking some of those very fundamental things we've always done and just repackaging it in a way that is leaning into where, again, platforms, algorithms, and culture are going right now. So I just, when you look at it looking this way, it feels super logical, but I guess, most things feel super logical with the benefit of hindsight. And I think, in general for us, as a new platform emerges, confirming safety and things like that, it's very much of this belief in general of platform diversification, be making as much as you can in as many places as you can. Because, for example, you haven't asked about it yet, but what happens if TikTok goes away? And for us, it is one, not my job and so beyond my pay grade and abilities to know what's going to happen there. But we have near daily, sometimes multiple times a day communication with all of our clients about that, because it is here's what we are seeing. And then here's what we do in preparation. Here's what we recommend you do in preparation. But one of the biggest things that we've preached from the beginning is be on as many platforms as possible, because we don't know what's going to shift with the platform. And if Instagram and TikTok went away tomorrow, I know a lot of creators who wouldn't know how to get in touch with their audience, full stop.
Yeah, for sure. And
how out of your control that is. So, we should probably be talking about YouTube Shorts. You should probably, truly thinking about other platforms and other ways to reach people. And then if you're really hitting that right, think about, back to the concept of underpriced attention. If there aren't as many people there, you're not competing with as many people for eyeballs, and you can really establish an audience earlier. Yeah. So again, I know I'm kind of slightly off topic, but we really do view live shopping and social commerce as extensions of its new platforms and new opportunities. And better to be early and learn than be late and have missed the moment, or be late when it's too expensive. It's kind of cross that curve where it's no longer underpriced attention.
Yeah, or when these platforms are, fighting against each other for share of audience and they're giving away a lot for free. So, yeah, great point. Well,
Exactly.
Matt, I've kept you up late on the East Coast. We're coming along to the hour mark here, so I want to let you end your day. Thank you, man, so much for coming on the show. Really appreciated getting to know you a bit and getting some insights of what you're up to over at the Sasha Group. If people want to learn more or engage with you personally, where do they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can, I'll do this. You can send me an email. It's matt.garcia@thesashagroup.com. I think everybody knows where to find Gary and where to find his content, but DM on LinkedIn, shoot me an email. Would love to chat with anybody. And Dylan, thanks so much for making the time and having me on, man. I really enjoyed this. It's a fast hour. I mean, hopefully it was as fast for you as it was for me, but fast hour for me. I really, really enjoyed it.
No, I love it. Appreciate you. And I'm excited to continue to watch to see what you guys are going to build. So for those of you who are following along at home, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you happen to be listening or watching. And if you give us an honest review on whatever podcast platform or whatever platform you're watching today, that's how the show finds a bigger audience organically. And if you know an account person out there in ad land, or someone who is at school and knows they want to be in the advertising industry, or someone who wants to meet one of their idols from the books that they're reading in business, don't forget to share this episode, and we will appreciate that. And we will see you again very shortly. Thanks so much, Matt.